Hey there, my name is James. Welcome to Game Stories, where we write games to tell stories. And in this episode, I want to just walk us through, just give a brief overview of a bunch of different micro role-playing games. In the last couple episodes, we've looked at Lasers and Feelings by John Harper and Epidiah Ravishaw's What is a Role-Playing Game. In this one, I'm just going to pull up kind of a bunch of different games and walk through, not give the whole examples and teasing out rules and stuff, but just give you a sense of how they work. In case you're interested in looking at those and having a broader view of what role-playing games like this can do. So let's take a look. No, not that. This, yeah. Okay. Here's the syllabus on the assignments page. I have got, for the role-playing game story, we've got several role-playing games to look at, right? There's what is a role-playing game up top. There's also Lasers and Feelings here. But there's several others that I want to talk about as well, just to give you a sense of how they work. The first is The Pool by, I don't want to guess, but I think it's James West. Yeah, I got it. Okay. And The Pool is doesn't have a setting or a theme exactly. One of its first rules says, come up with that. Sit down and talk about the kind of story you want to tell. It has a very simple character creation system where you just kind of make up a little backstory, a few elements in it that help tie your character into whatever theme that you guys have invented together. It allows you to pick some traits that you can have, and then it has kind of a little bit of math here where you can assign certain +1s or +2s to the kinds of traits you can have. Traits would be like, I'm a magician, or I'm really good at driving, or expert sword person using swords, or whatever, right? Scholar of the ancient world or something like that. But also things like this, right? Like he is driven by love, outcast and lost of the order, searching for a means to raise his love from the dead, +1, right? So you can dig into that rule to see how you can come up with this stuff, but it's a way of giving a little mechanical boost to parts of your character. Kind of like in Lasers and Feelings, how there was, you could be more lasers or more feelings, and that mattered when you roll dice. This is a similar thing where you have qualities that are going to matter when you roll dice, but not just lasers and feelings, right? Anything you want to invent. Then there's how rolling the dice works, and the way it happens is you will roll a pool of dice. I'm not going to go into the whole details of this, but every time that there's sort of a challenge, and there is a game master who says, all right, you're going to need to roll some dice now. The GM is going to give you some dice. You'll start with some dice of your own. You can add some of your own dice to the pool of dice that you're about to roll. Some of your qualities may allow you to add extra dice, or to I think it's add extra dice and not give a boost to your roll. And then so you'll be rolling a whole bunch of 6-sided dice, and if any one of them is, I think it's a 6. No. If any one of them is a 1, then you succeed. But if none of them are a 1, then you fail. And you also, when you fail, you lose some of the dice that you've risked, so your dice pool will be shrinking. And then you can do certain things later in order to gain dice back into your pool. So there's kind of this weird currency of dice that you're risking and losing, but gaining more of. Always for each situation, trying to arrange it so that you're using your character and its qualities to get the biggest pool of dice you can. And then sometimes taking an extra risk on certain actions, rolling a bunch of dice and seeing were any of them a 1. And if any of them are, cool. If not, fail, right? There's more to this, but not a lot more than that, frankly. If you read this over, you'll see that's the core of the game. And this is a system that makes itself available to be hacked into any theme, right? Just use the dice pool, put it in your theme, put it in your story. So take a look at this one. I think it's well worth looking at. A lot of narrative-heavy games use a pool system similar to this. We even saw it show up in Lasers and Feelings, right, where you were rolling more dice if you had more applicable stuff. So this is a good one to look at for that. Another one also by John Harper, who wrote Lasers and Feelings, is The Wildlings. And in The Wildlings, it's also like a 4-page rule set, but very light. I wanted to include this one for sure because it's the only one, I think it's, the only one on the list that has different sided dice, which is, kind of traditional for role-playing games to have not just 6-sided dice, but lots of different sided dice. It's a bit of theme here. It's sort of an indigenous peoples vibe, although it doesn't say indigenous to where or when. So there's some kind of it might be a fantasy world, maybe not, I don't know. You have to kind of make that up. And then, although it has sort of a set of animals that might give you some clues about where you are or where you're not. The way this works is you're going to have a set of dice, a 4-sided die, a 6-sided die, an 8-sided die, a 10-sided die, and a 12-sided die. And you're going to assign those, you're going to place them even on different aspects of your character, which are represented by these animals. Let's go look at the character sheet. So I might place my 4-sided die here and my 12-sided die here, and I might place my 8-sided die here, etc. So there's the wolf, and I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but there's sort of some words that describe what the wolf part of you does. And here it's tracking, hunting, going into darkness. The snake is for sneaking, hiding, entry, and escape. The deer is for swiftness, grace, and opening your heart. The owl is for watching, listening, and planning. And the boar is for resisting, holding steadfast, and being aggressive. So you'll put all these dice in different places, and that will be the die that you use when you do something that is like that. When I do something snake-like, when I'm trying to sneak in, I roll my snake die. When I'm sitting back and sort of observing and trying to read a situation and understand it, I'll roll my owl die because I'm watching and listening and planning, right? If something hard or difficult's happening and I'm standing, holding strong and standing my ground, then I'm going to roll my boar die because I'm resisting and holding steadfast, right? The way resolution works is that if I get 3 or less, then something bad's going to happen. Which means if I'm rolling a 4-sided die, I don't seem to be able to select this. Oh, there we go. If I'm rolling a 4-sided die, that's pretty bad news, right? Because I'm probably not going to succeed. Can I zoom in on this? Yeah. Oh. There we go. If I roll 4, 5, or 6, I get to choose one outcome. If I do a 7, 8, or 9, I get 2 outcomes. 10 or higher is 3. So you can see that we'll see what outcomes are in a second. But the higher I roll, the better the outcome. But I always have at least some kind of chance of success, even on the smallest die, right? And I get to pick the number of outcomes. And these are them. It's basically an adjective that describes how I did the thing. I did it impressively. They were attacking me, but I stood my ground and I pushed them back. And I did that impressively, right? But what if I want to do something that's quick and quiet and thorough? Well, then I better be rolling 10 or higher. Right? What if I want to do something that's careful, but also forceful, right? Then I want to roll 2 or higher, or get 2 outcomes or higher. And we assume that if I did something quickly, then I probably also didn't do it quietly. Right? If I only got 1 outcome and I picked quickly, then it got done fast, but maybe somebody heard, or I didn't get it done quite right. It wasn't very precise, or it was a little bit sloppy and no one was impressed, or I didn't have quite enough force to achieve a certain result, but in other words, I'm never going to be able to do something that all of this applies to, and whatever I choose is going to give the game master, this game has a game master too, game master, I'm pretty sure, yeah, they call it the guide, it's a game master, will pick some quality that I didn't choose and say, okay, so you were quick, but you weren't very precise, you missed this, right? I think that's all on this. It's an interesting dice mechanism, interesting theme. So play around with this one, especially if you want to have some interesting different-sided dice in your game. This is a cool one to look at. Very neat little system. Okay, that was Wildlings. Lasers and Feelings, covered that. Everyone is John. I don't know if this tells us who it was by. I don't think it does. I'm pretty sure it was like some kind of 4chan thing. I don't really know where it comes from. But in this game, you'll sort of have, it's a competitive role-playing game for 3 or more people. And each person is going to be like a voice in John's head trying to achieve some kind of secret objective that they have that they want John to do during the story. So there'll be some kind of, I think they call it a neurosis, an obsession, right? So you are one of John's obsessions, and so you might be like, I want John to touch all the cats or something, or always check doorknobs or something, or something much harder like, I don't know, assassinate public figures or something weird like that. And so as the story goes on, you're going to be sort of bidding for control over John and then trying to accomplish things that sort of fit your obsession. And John will basically be ping-ponging between the different players and acting really strangely because he's trying to accomplish a bunch of different things that you want him to do. You'll get points for having accomplished things during play with John. There's a sort of simple die rolling mechanism and also a currency where you can increase your die roll by bidding a little bit higher with this currency called willpower, which is also what you use to bid for control. So there's tokens here. There's an economy where you sort of bid for control of John, and then whoever bid the highest is going to be in control. You'll do some things. Sooner or later, it's going to be hard. You'll have to roll a die. Before you roll that die, you can spend willpower to increase your die roll results. But sooner or later, you're going to run out or fail, and then somebody else's turn is going to come up. This is, again, one sheet of rules. You can learn this pretty quick. It's an interesting one, especially if you want to create a game that's totally wacky. Although I have sort of read about people who have used this to play pretty interesting scenarios when the game master has sort of used a system like this to get them collectively to accomplish something as well as individually. So it can be hacked and put to interesting purposes. Worth checking out. Honey Heist is the next one. There's a couple different versions of Honey Heist you can get. One is the original version that was drawn on a piece of paper. It's just sort of posted on Imgur here. And the other is someone did a sort of a nice layout that splits the information between what the game master needs to know and what the players need to know. It's by Grant Howitt. And basically the theme of this game, I think, is what makes it kind of work, which is that you're bears trying to break into somewhere that has a lot of honey and you're going to steal it. You've only got 2 stats, just like in Lasers and Feelings. But unlike Lasers and Feelings, your level of that stat will fluctuate over the course of play depending on whether you succeed or fail at something. Your stats are bear and criminal. Anytime you do something that's bear-like, you roll your bear stat. Anything you do something that's not bear-like, it's criminal, right? Acting like a human, criminal. Sneaking in and robbing stuff, criminal, right? Unless you're doing it in a bear way, I guess. So there's some gray area. But as you succeed and fail, those stats go higher and lower, and so you're more likely or less likely to succeed with them as things go. Makes it a little bit more dynamic, and tends to be pretty funny. Bonus hat table, stuff like that. Like, oh, I'm wearing a cowboy hat. So it's goofy, funny, but also pretty cool story. And like Lasers and Feelings, has kind of a randomized setup for the GM to figure out what kind of situation are they trying to steal honey from. Well, anyway, you can look it over. It's a fun one to look at, and I think it's a good example of how to take something similar to Lasers and Feelings and do something radically different with your theme, right? And Shadows is a game that was designed for kids. What does it say? Oh yeah, by Zach Arnston. And it's very simple. The way that you do your character is your character is like followed by a shadow, which is like an imaginary friend that wants you to do kind of bad stuff, right? You've sort of got your like id and superego here. You've got your kid and you've got your imaginary friend. I suppose you could play it as the kid wants to do bad stuff and the imaginary friend is trying to protect him. But the way the rules are is like you have your kid and your shadow, which is some kind of monster that follows you around, but you're cool with it. The GM is going to set up like you're asleep at night in bed, you wake up, you hear something downstairs that scares you. What do you do? And every time the GM asks, what do? You're going to roll 2 6-sided die. One of them is going to be your kid die, and one of them is going to be your shadow die. Whichever one is... No, that's not quite how it works. If your kid die is equal to or greater than the shadow die, then you do what the kid wants to do. If the shadow die is greater, then you do what the shadow wants to do. So when the GM says, what do you want to do? You sort of say, well, I want to do this. And then the GM says, well, what does your shadow want you to do? And then you have to come up with, oh man, I think my shadow wants me to do that. Get me into bigger trouble, take greater risks, put me in danger, right? And I roll the dice, and I go either way. I like this. I like this system, and I think it's hackable for any situation where a character might be acting against their will, but you don't want to take away agency from players. Like some games have like mind control stuff or rules that would like allow one player to make another character do something, which feels kind of creepy and icky or just not fun because you want to be in control of your character. This sort of puts that in the hands of the player, saying you have something that wants you to do bad stuff and you have something that wants you to do good stuff. You tell me both of those things, and then we'll let chance decide which one happens, right? So even if I end up doing the thing that my shadow wanted me to do, I still got to say what that was, right? I didn't pick something that I thought would make me feel bad or awful. I still had some control over what the bad thing would be, and it might even be something that I'm kind of curious to do, right? So worth reading over, definitely worth playing, and it's pretty fun and cute if you've got. I would play this with grown-ups. It's just the fact that you draw your character and draw your shadow is cool anyway. So not just for kids. All right, last one. Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen. It says only read the last page here because this is a very large book. The PDF is quite huge, but on the very last page, it has like a one-page summary of the entire rules. Now, it's worth reading the whole book because it gets you into the spirit of what Munchausen's all about and the kinds of stories Munchausen would tell, and he sort of tells you how to play the game, how good he is at playing the game, and how his great adventures and stuff. If you don't know, Munchausen is a fictional character who just has the biggest and best stories, right? He's super boastful to an incredibly absurd degree, where he didn't just he wasn't just the first person to fly. He visited the moon 100 years ago with the princess of Jupiter and conquered the eclipse, and that's why we still have the sun today or something, right? Just really ridiculous, outlandish stories that he can brag about. The way this game works, though, is that one person is going to be kind of on the spot to be the boaster, the Munchausen character. It's going to start with someone saying, tell us about the time this, or, I heard that you did that. And then the Baron character will sort of narrate how that works. And at any point, so this is kind of where there's no dice in this game. Similar to Epidie Ravichal's What is a Role-Playing Game, there's no dice there either. The results of difficult situations were just decided by players. The way this one works, though, is there's a currency where, I forget what they call it, but you have a certain amount of coins or pennies or something. And as the player who's sort of boasting and making up these grand stories is going, someone will pose a challenge like, but I heard this, or didn't you do this, right? He's saying, well, I flew to the moon on a hot air balloon. And you might say, Baron, didn't I understand that flying fish attacked you on the way? And at that point, they will also offer, I think they bid one, I think they just push like one coin forward. I may be getting this wrong, and I'm not going to hunt through it right now. In other words, offering the Baron a coin to take that part of the story and add it in and account for it in some way. The Baron might say, oh, no, you're wrong about that, and sort of bid back with some currency saying, I'm going to pay not to have to do that. And there's sort of a back and forth at that point where the challenging player and the Baron can each sort of outbid each other to say, no, you did do it. No, I know that you misunderstand me. I'm sorry, friend, but that's not the case. And sooner or later, one of them will see like that's a lot of currency on the table, sort of narrative power currency. I'll take it. And if it's the challenging player, then the story just goes on. If it's the Baron character who takes the currency, then they have to say, you're right, we were attacked by flying fish, and here's how we accounted for that. So because it's a boast, like any crazy story about how they conquered that is fine. So you're not really resolving a task so much as like resolving the challenge of, are you going to add this challenge into your story or not? And then you kind of go around. I forget how it changes, how the turn order changes, but you sort of go around and then just tell all these boastful stories and have a good time. I think this is a good design to look at to show how you can use in-game currency to divide narrative responsibility, and sort of a bidding mechanism to accomplish things. Instead of rolling dice or instead of just saying stuff, there's a bit of a dynamic power that floats around the table during play, because some people will have a lot of it because they accepted a bunch of stuff, and then they'll be able to spend it to add other things into people's stories, and so there's this more of a dynamic exchange at the table that's kind of interesting to play with. So that is it for this video. All of these small games are worth playing, worth looking at, totally hackable. It's a nice collection because it sort of shows you what role-playing games can do. It doesn't show you everything that they can do, but it shows you a lot of what they can do mechanically and narratively without having you have to go out and buy giant core rule books and stuff, right? It's pretty straightforward. You can learn a lot in just a few play sessions, okay? So take a look at those, hack them, make them do different stuff, make them tell different stories, take the systems and tweak them a little bit until the people at your table are doing and telling the kinds of stories that you want them to do and tell. And that's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.